Chapter 22, Relationship Exit. The 5 steps to conscious uncoupling. When relationships shift, especially long-standing or deeply entangled ones, most of us are handed exactly 2 cultural scripts: stay and suffer, or leave and burn it down. Conscious Uncoupling by Catherine Woodward Thomas offers a third option, not an easy one, but a humane one. At its core, the framework isn't about doing everything right. It's about moving through relational change with enough honesty and care that no one has to become the villain just so the story makes sense. The first step is emotional freedom. That means letting yourself feel what is actually there, not what you think you should feel. Grief, anger, nostalgia, fear, gratitude, often all at once. Suppressing those emotions doesn't make you stronger. It just guarantees they'll surface again sideways later. From there comes reclaiming your power. Not power over the other person, but responsibility for your part in what existed and what ended. This isn't about self-blame, it's about authorship. What did you learn about your own needs, your limits, your patterns, your capacity? How do you carry that forward without dragging the past behind you like a live wire? The third step is breaking the spell of blame. Blame is seductive because it gives clarity and moral high ground. It also freezes growth. When you shift from who was wrong to what actually happened between us, the story gets more and more complex and far more useful. Most relational endings are not crimes. They're mismatches, miscommunications, timing issues, or unhealed wounds colliding. Then comes creating new agreements, especially when lives remain entangled. Children, finances, shared homes, community, or long-standing emotional bonds don't just evaporate just because the relationship label has changed. These agreements aren't about pretending everything is fine. They're about deciding how to treat each other now. Finally, there's holding a vision for your future. Not a fantasy, a grounded picture of who you're becoming. What kind of life fits you? What kind of relationships support that life? This vision isn't anti-love, it's pro-alignment. Taken together, these steps don't guarantee a painless transition. They do, however, dramatically reduce collateral damage. Exercise. Make the 5 steps your own. Instead of breaking this into 5 separate worksheets, try this in a single sitting. Set aside quiet time, write freely, don't edit. Step 1. Find emotional freedom. Write a letter to your past relationship. In this letter, express your feelings of loss and grief about the relationship, the positive aspects and moments you cherish, and what you learned from this experience. Step 2, reclaim your power. Create a growth reflection journal entry where you identify your contributions to the relationship, articulate where you caused pain or harm in the relationship, and write down at least 3 lessons you've learned from this experience. Step 3, break the spell of blame. Write down any blame you feel towards your partner or the situation. Then for each blame statement, reframe it into a statement of understanding. For example, a blame statement could be, "They never listened to me." An understanding statement can be, "I see now that we had different communication styles." Step 4, create a new set of relationship agreements. If applicable, list the shared responsibilities or aspects of your life that will continue after the uncoupling. For example, children, finances, mutual friends. For each item, outline potential agreements that respect both partners' needs. And step 5, hold a vision for your future. Visualize your ideal future post-relationship. Create a vision board or list goals and aspirations that reflect your individual desires. Include personal goals, career, hobbies, personal development, relationship goals, how you want to relate with others, and self-care practices that nourish you. You're listening for the places where your body softens or tightens. That's usually where the truth lives. Losing status in the hierarchy. If relationships in polyamory are fluid, it follows that hierarchy can be fluid too. This is where things get quiet, tense, or politely avoided. Losing status, real or perceived, cuts deep. When people enter polyamory with a hierarchical structure, there's usually an unspoken hope that the hierarchy will protect them. That no matter how many connections form, their position is secure. For many people, that sense of security is the scaffolding that makes opening the relationship possible in the first place. But the reality is messier than that. Sometimes new relationships grow in significance. Sometimes emotional gravity shifts. Sometimes a partner's life direction changes, and suddenly the hierarchy that you thought was stable feels negotiable. This doesn't happen often, but it does happen, and it can be seismic. The fear usually shows up in familiar forms. Am I being replaced? Am I less important? Did I miss something here? It can feel indistinguishable from abandonment, even when no one is leaving. There are a few common ways that this will play out. Sometimes a metamor relationship deepens into something that feels central, leaving an existing partner disoriented about where they now stand. Sometimes a new partner ascends, not through malice or manipulation, but because compatibility, availability, or life circumstances align differently. Sometimes there's no obvious external shift at all, just an emotional disconnect that quietly widens until it's impossible to ignore. What makes this particularly hard is that we rarely talk about it before it happens. We talk about jealousy, we talk about agreements, we talk about compersion, but we don't often talk about the possibility that love might genuinely reorder priorities. That silence is where harm breeds. Fuck up, and the bachelor returns. Charlie and Nancy had been married for the better part of a decade. They were best friends and champs at raising their 7-year-old son together. They had found comfort in relating and were lovingly called Polly elders among their close circle of friends. And then Nancy met Daniel. He was fun, exciting, and very socially engaged. He was often the life of the party, and Nancy found herself mesmerized. Not only was he great arm candy, but he was also willing to do the work with Nancy. He showed up. He cared for her child. He consistently communicated and honored their agreements. One day, Nancy woke up and decided that she wanted to live with Daniel. She still had strong affection for Charlie, but this had now moved into a companionate love, and her fire for him had gone out. Here's where the problem exists. No one told Charlie. They went nearly a year where Nancy would act passive-aggressively. She began breaking agreements, fighting like a petulant teenager, treating Charlie like a lesser person. Then Charlie started to feel like a lesser person. He lost his footing. He attempted to wield control, even veto power. Then he realized he didn't have the power anymore. Within months, they were living in different houses. The fuck up here wasn't with the disentanglement, but rather in not bringing Charlie along on Nancy's journey to a new life partner. Acknowledging this possibility doesn't mean you expect it to happen. It means that you respect the reality that relationships evolve, and that pretending otherwise doesn't make you safer. If hierarchy matters to you, name why. If losing it terrifies you, say that out loud. Not as an accusation, but as a truth. And if you are the person whose feelings or priorities are shifting, the responsibility isn't to freeze yourself in place. It's to communicate clearly, slowly, and with care. Demotion experienced without consent or context is one of the fastest ways to rupture trust beyond repair. This is not about clinging or controlling. It's about honesty before momentum does the talking for you. Confronting fears of replacement. I remember a conversation with a friend just before my wedding. She was struggling with the concept of polyamory and asked, "What would you do if your partner left you for another man?" And I, full of confidence and philosophy, said something like, "If someone makes him happier than I do, I'd support that choice." It was an easy thing to say before there was any shared property, shared trauma, shared parenting, shared history, shared life infrastructure. Before I lived inside the truth that love isn't just emotion. Love is logistics. Love is bedtime routines and sick days and mortgages and the parts of life you'll only get to build if someone stays. The honest truth is that fear, losing my place, losing my status, losing the stability of what we've built, is one of my most tender edges to this day. Not because I don't believe in abundance, because I do, but because I'm human and my nervous system doesn't always speak in theory. The importance of communication. If a shift like this were to happen in a deeply entangled partnership, it wouldn't just be emotionally painful. It would require a full reevaluation of the relationship infrastructure. After years of building a life together, raising children, surviving trauma, commingling investments, the idea of untangling that while also feeling diminished in my partner's heart would be brutal. Not impossible, people have navigated it, but the reason it's so brutal is that most couples never talk about it until it's already happening. We talk about jealousy, we talk about agreements, we talk about consent and communication and repair, but we rarely talk about the possibility about love leaving or moving down. And in that silence is where panic thrives. Exercise. Craft a poly prenup. I'm a believer in talking about hard things while you still like each other. I don't mean creating a legal document. I mean creating a shared understanding early while the future still feels bright enough to be generous. Think of this as a relationship design conversation, the kind that helps you avoid catastrophic surprises later. Set aside a calm hour. Bring snacks. Write down your answers separately, then compare. 1. Hierarchy and structure. What does primary mean to each of us in practice? What is protected by hierarchy? Time, finances, parenting, holidays, public identity, living arrangements? And what would constitute a major shift in status? And how would we name it early? 2. Children and parenting. What roles do parents have? And what roles do they not have? What boundaries are non-negotiable where kids are concerned? What would we do if our structure changes but parenting responsibilities remain? 3. Living arrangements and logistics. If the romantic bond de-escalates, what happens to cohabitation? What boundaries are non-negotiable? What does staying family mean for us if we stop being lovers? 4. Money and shared assets. What's shared, what's separate, and what decisions require mutual consent? How do we handle new financial entanglements with other partners? 5. Communication and conflict. What tools do we use when we're triggered, not just when we're calm? What do we consider a must-disclose update? And when do we bring in therapy or mediation before we're bleeding out? Finally, 6. If we separate or de-escalate, what does a respectful ending look like in the ecosystem? What community norms do we want to preserve? What would repair mean even if we didn't stay partnered? You're not trying to predict every future. You're trying to build a shared map. The goal is not certainty. The goal is fewer blind corners. Experiencing grief without turning your polycule into a dumpster fire. Breakups are hard. The end of relationships can leave you disoriented, heartbroken, confused, furious, and full of unfinished questions. Feeling grief is expected. Processing grief is necessary. But one of the easiest ways to damage your other relationships is to make them the only container for your pain. I've learned this the hard way, and I've watched it happen in polycules over and over. One relationship ends, and suddenly the breakup becomes the dominant weather system across the entire ecosystem. Fuck up. Cry me a river. Therese fell hard for Colin. Everyone knew it. She talked about him constantly. When things got rocky, she talked about him even more. And when things ended badly, she turned to the same lovers and friends for support again and again and again. Over time, the polycule got tired. Not because they didn't love her, because they stopped feeling like lovers and started feeling like a breakup hotline. She stopped asking how they were doing. She stopped tending to her relationships with them. Her grief became the center of everything for months. Eventually, they asked her to stop processing with them. Here's the thing, grief deserves support. It just can't consume the oxygen of every connection you have. Build a support system. Grief has gravity. It pulls toward the nearest source of warmth, familiarity, and safety. In polyamory, that often means your other partners. And while it's natural to lean on the people who love us, it's not sustainable to turn to them in our primary processing container. You need a support system that can hold your grief without collapsing under it. That might look like trusted friends, chosen family, a therapist, a support group, or all of the above. What it should not look like is expecting your romantic partners to function as your therapist, crisis line, and emotional dumping ground. They have limits, even when they care deeply. During a recent breakup of my own, my husband eventually said something that I didn't want to hear but desperately needed. He reached his limit. He felt empathy for my pain, he loved me, and he no longer had the capacity to keep hearing the details of a relationship that wasn't his. That wasn't abandonment, it was honesty. Fuck up. Expecting partners to be your therapist. Nathan was furious at the end of his relationship with Hannah. He felt wronged, misunderstood, and obsessed with being right. Every conversation circled back to her. Every text exchange became evidence. Every voicemail was dissected. And Suze, another partner, became the primary recipient of all of it. She was kind, gentle, a good listener, and slowly she disappeared under the weight of Nathan's grief and resentment. He stopped asking how she was doing, stopped planning romantic time for them. She no longer felt like his partner, just a container. Nathan wasn't malicious, he was drowning, but grief doesn't excuse emotional extraction. Expecting your partners to process all of your pain will eventually create resentment, distance, or collapse. Love does not equal unlimited capacity. Communicate boundaries. Another partner of mine pointed out when I was overprocessing my breakup with them. I'm grateful for partners who are clear about their boundaries and are willing to communicate when they've had enough. However, not all partners will express their limits, especially if they are newer or more casual relationships. Exercise. Am I talking too much? Send this message or say it out loud. I know I'm going through it. You matter to me and I don't want to accidentally turn you into my therapist. What are your limits around hearing about this breakup? What feels okay and what would feel like too much? Then listen, because a breakup can end one relationship or it can quietly erode 5. Respect specialness in your other relationships. In some cases, your partner may want to be involved in your emotional process. They may say, I want to understand how you're feeling because I do care, but I want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this all the time. Just like in the early stages of a relationship, when you want to make your partner feel special, it's equally important to do this during a breakup to ensure that the other partners don't feel like they are merely a sounding board for your heartache. If your focus is solely on your grief, it can lead your partners to feel undervalued or unimportant. Just as we've discussed tips for nurturing partners during moments of new relationship energy, the same principles apply during a breakup. Exercise. Strategies for healthy grieving. If you are processing your grief, check in with your existing partners. First, ask for boundaries. Encourage your partners to communicate their limits around discussion of your breakup. 2, monitor frequency. Be conscious of how often you bring up your breakup with them. Even keep a log in your phone or in a notebook. 3, seek external support. Find resources outside of your romantic relationships to help you process your grief, such as friends or a therapist. 4, maintain specialness. Ensure your existing relationships continue to feel special and valued, even in the midst of your emotional turmoil. By following these guidelines, you can navigate your grief while minimizing the potential harm to your other relationships. Remember, grieving is a process, but it doesn't have to come at the expense of your other partner's emotional well-being. Forcing sides. Breakups in polyamory don't just happen between two people. They ripple through an entire network. And one of the fastest ways to fracture a polycule is to turn a breakup into a loyalty contest. Fuck up. Taking sides in a breakup. Adam and Denali broke up and Adam vanished. He dropped out of chats, stopped attending dinners, disappeared from the community space. Denali was hurt, understandably. She started sharing her side of the story in detail repeatedly with the same group. Slowly, people began taking sides. Without meaning to, Denali created a soft exile. Adam became the villain, Denali became the wronged party, and the polycule social structure shifted around that narrative. Conscious uncoupling makes a blunt but useful point. Trying to get someone kicked out of the village is a form of violence. Not always intentional, still real. There are no exceptions. Abuse, ongoing harm, there are exceptions. Abuse, ongoing harm, situations where the community needs protection. But most breakups are not that clean. They're two imperfect humans with mismatched needs and different pain. Communication and emotional support. As you process your breakup, be aware of how your emotions affect the larger group. Fuck up scenario. Creating a victim triangle. Jim, John, and Jack were the three amigos. Inseparable lovers and best friends. When John and Jack argued, Jim mediated. Over time, he sided more with John. Jack felt ganged up on. When the triad collapsed, Jack didn't just lose lovers, he lost his world. This is what happens when conflict becomes teams. The invitation here is simple, and it's hard. Speak your experience without recruiting an army. Use I statements. Name your pain without building a villain. Let the community be a community, not a court. Because if polyamory is anything, it's learning how to let relationships change without turning every ending into a social purge. Proceed with caution. Building community with compassion. As we navigate our relationships, let's aim to maintain a generous heart and a compassionate spirit. We should strive to continue to build collective love while honoring our individual paths and boundaries. The opportunity for meaningful connections is not reserved for any particular class or group. It should be inclusive and accessible to all. In nurturing our polycules, we can create spaces that allow for growth, healing, and deepening of relationships, even amidst the inevitable changes. By doing so, we honor the complexities of love and attachment while ensuring that our community remains intact and supportive.